Let's get started. So first thing you want to do is cut out the template. Feel free at any time to pause the video just so you can do this at your own pace. To use the template, you want to line the lines that are on the template with the lines of the paper. That way the pieces you cut out have room to stretch, and then we can shape it into what we want. Now the circle, you won't be able to really do that, but that's okay. So all the other pieces, make sure the lines are matching the template. Now there's two types of petals here. There's petal number 1 and petal number 2. Petal number 2 is the one that's being cut right now. Depending on if you want a more elongated flower versus a more round flower, you would choose either or. Okay, so pick one of the petal shapes to work with today, and you would cut about 12 to 18 pieces. So 12 to 18 pieces of whatever petal and one of each of the yellow. Let's start with the seed pod. Take out your cotton spun ball and a wire. Apply some glue about 1 centimeter down from the tip of your wire all around. Just enough that it actually goes into the cotton ball. You don't want too much glue outside. So this is tacky glue we're using, so a little goes a long way. Once you've applied your glue, insert it into the hole in the cotton spun ball and let it dry. Now after this, we are going to cover the entire cotton spun ball with yellow. In order to do this, take out your square piece of paper, place it on top of the cotton spun ball, and cut along the edges of the cotton spun ball and make a circle. So make sure to leave an edge because we are going to utilize that to glue it down a lot more seamlessly. And it's okay if it's not going to be a perfect circle. Everything gets glued down. We just wanted to make sure that it's going to cover this cotton spun ball. Okay, so take your time, have fun. Once you have that, now place your 2 thumbs in the middle. Push outward as your index finger curves inward. So you get an arch. Now a little hat for the top of your cotton spun ball. Once you do that, apply glue in the middle of that circle. Just the middle portion of that, just the top part of the cotton spun ball, leaving the edge without glue at the moment. Place it onto the ball. Once you're done with that, you have edges that are not glued down. Take your scissors and cut slits into them all around. After you've done cutting all the slits in, you apply the glue and then one by one glue it down. And it's okay if it overlaps, and that's what we want. This allows a better coverage since it's a circle shape, a round shape. So sure to do that all around until you've glued everything down. Now that you've glued it down, next we're going to cover the sides of the cotton spun ball. Take out the smaller rectangle shape paper that you've cut out. Lightly stretch it, not completely. You still want some stretch in that paper for what we're going to do next. And then using the same thing that we did with the hat, place your thumb in the middle of the rectangle and push outward. Do that along the middle portion of that rectangle. Now you create an arch that will allow the cotton ball to sit nicely in it and get glued down a lot more seamlessly. And you'll glue it all around, and once it is finished, you cut off the extra pieces. So apply the glue at the beginning portion of the paper, and you can do this on the cotton ball too, which I will show you in a bit. Start off right at the edge of where the top hat ended. The goal is to cover all white areas. So because the circle on the top wasn't as precise, you're going to have coverage that's going to be uneven throughout. Just make sure that this rectangle will cover all white areas. So this is where you apply the glue onto the cotton ball. As you can tell, it's just the middle portion. You can do both ways, on the paper or on the cotton ball. On the cotton ball might be slightly easier. It just depends on what works best for you. There's no right and wrong. So cover the entire thing, and once you've reached a full circle, cut off the extra piece, put it aside, because we're going to be using that for lotus seeds at the end. Okay, so nothing really goes wasted here. So now that you've glued it all around, we're going to open up the bottom and apply some glue, and then we're going to squeeze the paper all together so it glues everything down. The most important part is to glue the cotton ball, and it should cover it. So what is glued on the stem isn't that important, because later on when we're working on the stem part, we might have to cut that off just so the tube can actually fit in there. But for right now, this is what you do. Now next is the fringe, the stamen part. Taking the bigger piece of rectangle paper that you cut out, now you want to stretch this out completely, all the way. So the edges, everything gets stretched out completely. Try to make sure that you don't rip the paper. Okay, once you've done that, fold it in half and fold it in half again. As you can tell, the stretch of the paper is pretty big from what we started out to be. Whether it's the thicker paper or the finer paper, they all have a really good stretch. Okay, so fold it in half and half again. Now take your scissors and we're going to cut fringes into that. We're going to cut about 3/4 down, leaving about 1/4 uncut. The smaller the fringe you cut, the more fuller you get as it overlaps. It doesn't need to be this thin. It's entirely up to you. So do whatever feels comfortable. But what's important is to only cut about 3/4 of that paper, leaving 1/4 uncut. And the uncut area is where we're going to apply glue. So the reason why we folded it a couple times is just to make it easier on us. We're going to work smart, not hard. But you can actually have the entire piece of paper laid out flat, and you just take your time and, zenfully cut out fringes all the way through. You can absolutely do that too. After you're done, unfold everything and look for the places that were the folding areas and that might have a bigger fringe, and go back in to kind of make it smaller. Kind of just check all your fringes, and you can tell there are pieces that fall down once we're cutting, and that's not going to be a problem. You do not need to glue it back in. There's so many fringes that you won't be able to tell if any is missing once it's glued on. So after you're done with that, roll the fringes all together. Then place the fringe between your two palms and then roll it back and forth. Just the fringe part though. What this will do is it will create a more natural look to the stamen instead of having it sit straight up. Once you're done with that, you can unroll it. You also have the option actually of going in and twisting each stamen or fringe one by one. And with a thicker paper, you might need to, but this is a pretty thin paper. It's a doublet. It's a 60 gram by 60 gram glued together. So once you're done with that, kind of curl in the top part of the fringe inward and apply glue at the 1/4 portion that you did not cut. Now my thumb is at the middle portion of the cotton spun ball. I am going to glue it below that, just so the bottom part of that fringe sits right at the edge of the top of that cotton spun ball. So make sure you don't glue any of the fringes. You're only gluing the uncut portion, and then you're just going to glue it all around. You're going to overlap. Okay, so overlap in a straight line. Don't downward spiral, just straight across. As you're doing that, you can see the fringes are a lot fuller. So the thinner you cut them, the more fringes you'll get, the more overlap you do, the more fuller it'll be. And so if you look at this and you're like, well, I actually would like a lot more fringes, take another piece of paper and cut it. Let's cut some petals. So taking out your template, this is going to be petal number 1. We're going to align the lines with the paper, and we're going to fold it 2 to 3 times. Now the reason why we're doing that is just so we can cut out a few petals at the same time. And especially if you have to cut out like a lot. There's flowers that need like 100 petals. This could help save some time. But with a thicker crepe paper, I always recommend not to do more than 3 petals at the same time. It's not that your scissors can't cut it, it's because the paper is more likely to move around as you cut when you have to hold on. And so you might get some interesting looking petals at the end, or you might have a lot more fringes just because it was a thicker piece that you were doing. You're trying to cut more than 3. So 3 is what I recommend for the thicker crepe paper. Now, finer crepe paper, I probably would do 4, maybe 5, and it really just depends. But no more than that. And you can always do this one by one too. And when you do it one by one, you get to know exactly how that petal is going to turn out. Because sometimes you might notice, oh, I didn't hold on to the paper as well, and it shifted a little bit. That's okay, right? So 12 to 18 of whichever petal that you like to use today. So what I'm just showing you, if you had a large piece of paper like this, how would you make it a lot easier for you to cut out petals? And that would be placing the petal onto the paper and then just roughly cutting the paper to fit the template. So you get a strip of paper, and instead of working with a large piece of paper, you get a smaller piece, and it's easier for your hands to navigate. And then for this is about 4 folds is all I would do, 4 to 5. And you can tell after a while if the paper is moving on you a lot more, or you have to pinch down a lot harder just to make sure it doesn't move. And then ergonomically, that's, it's not as pleasant. I would just cut less, even cut one by one if you have to. So now that you have all your petals cut, we're going to shape them one by one. Using the same method that we did with the hat, you're going to use your thumb, place it in the middle, and push outward as your index curves it in. But you're going to continue that motion further up of the petal, leaving the tip untouched in the bottom. And you're also going to slightly stretch out just a little bit of that petal, just so it's a little bit wider in the middle. And then use your thumb to smooth it out by going with the grain of the paper. Okay. You're going to end up with a C curve. And this is the petal number 1 next to a petal number 2. As you can tell, it being shaped and when it's just cut out, it's quite different. So do this for all your petals that you've cut out. Take your time. Let's put it all together. So with your petal number 1 and the seed pod that you've finished, we're going to position the petal so that the last row will cover all the yellow. So you don't want to see any more yellow by the time you're done. So with that in mind, you're going to figure out where you want to glue your first row. Now, based off of this, I'm determining if I glue it right here, what is the height of the petal over the fringe? Does that give me the size or the shape or the form of the flower that I like? And also determining, well, do I want a lot of petals, and do I have a lot of coverage that I will need so that I do cover all the yellow? After I'm done formulating that, I'm going to be applying glue at the end of the petal that I didn't touch or shape. I'm gluing it very close to the bottom edge of that cotton ball spun, of that seed pod, as you can tell right there. I'm going to place the second petal right next to the first without overlapping. There's going to be a gap, and that's okay because this is just the first row. The gap will get covered up with the second row of petals. So you do that for the first entire row. Just place all the petals right next to each other, no overlapping, and you're going to get about 4 petals for this row. Now for my third row, I'm actually going to place it at the very end, at the bottom. Now, this is where I'm going to be very mindful to make sure that all the yellow is going to be covered by this last row that I'm doing. Okay, so I stretched out the bottom portion of that a little bit more, just so I can cover it. Now for the top part, yellow, I would just stretch out the bottom of the first petal, second row petal. Now because the glue is still wet, I'm able to play around with it. If it was dried out, you wouldn't be able to move around the petals anymore. So it's perfect timing to be able to do it now. And just as you go, make sure your hands are clean from glue before placing the next petal, and also make sure it's dry. With colored crepe paper, it will bleed when water gets on it. And because the glue is water soluble, as you can tell, the bottom portion that has glue is already turning another color. And that's also because it's water based. So continue the process. Each petal goes in between 2 petals all the way through. Now, as you finish the petals, the next thing to do is actually open up each petal to start shaping it. Shaping it with the way that you want it, opened on the flower. This gives you a better idea in terms of how the flower is actually looking. Also, all before the glue sets in. And then you can decide, well, do I want more petals? I'm going to use this petal, I'm going to place it in this area, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to place it in the other angle, I'm going to look at it, and until I determine, okay, well, I want another petal, or I don't want another petal, and I might want 2 petals. So I, based off of what I'm looking at, I wanted a petal right here. So I'm going to apply some glue at the end, same process, and I'm going to tape it up. So that's my flower. Now, as you can tell, the stretched out portion of the thicker crepe paper petal actually is almost the same feel as the thinner one. So a finer crepe paper is just a more stretched out, thicker one. But yeah, so this is petal number 1. So let's put together a flower with petal number 2. So this is petal number 2, the more elongated petals. It's already shaped. As you can tell, the shape is closer to the template size, and it's because the paper is already pretty stretched out. There's not a lot of give that I can still give you. Same process. You're going to determine where you want to position the petal with the end goal in mind that the last row is going to be at the bottom. It needs to cover the entire yellow seed pod. Okay, so, and because this is a lot longer in terms of petal, you want to play around with it. It might not be exactly the same position as petal number 1. Okay, so kind of after you determine that, you apply glue the same way you did for petal number 1, and you start gluing. And it would be one petal right next to each other without any overlap. Okay, so I also decided for this one that I'm going to place it at the end of the seed pod, the bottom. So after the first row is done, this is what it looks like. This is with 4 petals, and the one that I'm holding has 5 petals in the middle. As you can tell the difference, it's a little more closer together, so you'll get a flower that's going to be maybe more closed versus the 4 petal. It seems more wider. You might end up with a more open flower. So second row is the same. It's always going to be between 2 petals. Continue that for the whole second row. And then you're going to do the same for the last row, which you're going to be gluing it at the very bottom of your seed pod. So now that you have finished your flower, your third row, open it up and kind of move each petal, position it, and kind of take a look at it the same way you would with petal number 1. Now we can compare the two, one that has 4 petals in the middle versus one that has 5. It looks slightly different, but it's actually the same petal number 2. So depending on how you position each petal, the height you glue it, how many petals that you're going to have in the middle, that can dictate how your flower will turn out. So this is petal number 2. So now that we have our flower, it's time to see if we need another petal anywhere. So I don't do this until I've gotten a chance to open up the flower, open up the petals, shape them, position them the way I like. And then I take a remaining petal that I haven't glued, and I will position it in different areas while I'm looking at it in different angles, whether it be from top to bottom, from the sides. I'm twirling it, and I'm positioning petal from this end to another end just to see if I like it. And if I feel like it's calling out to me today, and this is the flower I'm looking for today, I will add another petal, just like I'm doing here too. Now, sometimes you'll find that after all that, and after all the positioning especially, a petal might seem like it's going to be falling. And it's okay, especially now, if the glue's not even dry yet. You can peel it off, apply some more glue, position it. You can even glue a little bit higher on the petal just to have it stay in a certain angle or certain position that you like. So all of that is only done towards the end, where we're here right now. Don't do it prior, because there's so much going on. You don't want to fully commit just yet to a positioning without knowing how the rest will come out. So now that I've added one petal, I'm looking at it from different angles again. And I'm thinking, well, I think this place looks a little bare. If I added another petal, what would that look like? And I like it. I feel like it's more complete with this one. So I am going to add glue and add another petal here. So now that we're done with the flower, give it some time to dry. And one of the ways you can do that is to bend the wire and just have it hang at the edge of the table using a heavy object to hold down the wire, or you can put it in a vase. Either or, but give it some time for it to dry. Let's work on the stem. So after the flower has gotten a chance to dry, make sure to straighten out your stem. Grab the tube and insert it into the stem. Initially, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the tube can go all the way up to the bottom of the flower. As you can see, the yellow paper actually stops it from going all the way up. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to use your scissors and lightly cut into the paper, not the wire, and rip off that extra yellow that's on the stem. And then insert your tube all the way up, making sure that it can. And if you need an anchoring point to help you, use the seed pod and push down as you push up the tube. So now you can see that it is going all the way up, all the way to the bottom of the lotus. And if you see anything on the tube, like that sticker, don't worry about it. We're going to cover the entire tube, so nothing's going to be seen. Now that we know that tube can go all the way up, you're going to pull it back down and apply glue onto the wire about halfway, and then reinsert the tube all the way up to the bottom of the flower. This will allow the tube and the wire to kind of stay put as it dries, but it does take some time to dry. And so when we are going to be covering the stem, be extra careful not to pull on it too hard. It will definitely move the tube, and that's not what you want. So be really gentle. Now, to cover the stem, you're going to use the green crepe paper strips. You're going to apply glue at one end, position it underneath the flower at the tip of the tube with one finger holding it down and the other hand pulling it as you glue it across and covering the tip of the stem. So our goal right here is just to cover the tip, straight across, but stretching out the paper as we glue. Now, once you've made it one round on the tip and you cover the stem, now you come down with a slight angle. Reapplying glue as you go and using your index finger on the glue, your thumb on the other side, to spread out the glue as you stretch the paper. Your other hand twirling on the stem. And your goal is to cover this entire stem. Now you can cover this straight up with the flower on top. Some people actually will turn it around where the flower is facing down and they're holding the stem on top to twirl. It really just depends on what works for you. You could try it both ways and see if you like one or the other. So there's really no right and wrong, which is the best part about making these flowers. It is really forgiving. You can create your own method, and you might even come up with a method better than what I'm showing you here. So whatever works. So the goal is to cover the entire stem. Okay, and you'll need more than one strip based on the length of the strip that I have in the video. So now that we're at the end of the first strip, to connect the second strip, you're actually gonna apply glue the same way you did, but you're gonna stretch out the paper first. That way the color of the paper matches what you have on the stem. And then same thing as you've been doing, at a slight angle, applying glue as you go and stretching out the paper. You're gonna cover all the way down. Now, this stem is quite long, and if you find that you don't need this long, I would always recommend bending the stem when you can versus cutting it. And if you're gonna cut it, use a wire cutter. You're gonna ruin your scissors by cutting into the wire. So now that you've reached the end, you wanna cover this up. And this is how I cover it. I go around, I go around and I cover it, cover the hole, and then I reverse glue it at an angle. So same thing that I've been doing with the stem, but I'm reversing it after I cover the hole. Lastly, let's make some lotus seeds. Now to make some lotus seeds, you're going to take the extra yellow paper that we had from the beginning. You're going to stretch it completely out. We are going to be using this like scratch paper, so we don't need any of the creases. In fact, even if you had a smaller piece of paper, it would still work because once you stretch it out, it gives you a good amount to work with. Now I'm stretching all the way to the edge because I want to maximize the amount that I can use. And it doesn't matter if there is a discoloration or mismatch. You're going to tear a piece, you're going to crunch it up, roll it into a ball. Now it's going to be important at this stage that your hands are completely dry and completely clean. You don't want any dry glue on your fingers, because when you do that and as you apply fresh glue, because you want to apply it just to make sure the ball doesn't open up, it will turn it gray. And what that gray is dead skin. So we don't want any of that. Okay, so make sure as you are working on the lotus seeds, clean out your hands after each one, have a fresh start. How many lotus seeds are we making? It's entirely up to you. So it could be 6, it could be 5, it could be 8, it could be 1, it could be none. And I've actually made flowers that didn't have any just because I didn't really want to make any at the time. But, you know, to be botanically correct, there are lotus seeds. We're not going to be botanically correct in terms of the amount of lotus seeds, but there are lotus seeds. And in order to glue them on, there's 2 methods. You can apply glue onto the top of your seed pot first, and then gently put the lotus seed on top of the glue. The other method is to apply glue on the lotus seed and then put it on the top of the seed pod. So whichever way works is more convenient, it's easier for you, that's the method I recommend you choosing. And the goal is just to get it on there. So however you get it done. And just like that, you now have your own lotus flower. And so this is petal number 2. So remember that intention that you put in while you're making your flower. It now holds that energy. So wherever you decide to put it, that's what's resonating out. And this is petal number 1. Slightly different, all beautiful in its own unique way. So I love to see what you come up with. Until next time.